Hello and welcome once again to episode 122 of Code Completion. We're a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So we have a lot to catch up on, mostly because I was sick and I prevented us from having any semblance of a regular recording schedule these past 2 weeks. So if I suddenly mute out, it's because I'm coughing hysterically. But in those 2 weeks, like everything got announced. We have a lot to talk about. The most interesting being that the Swift programming language book is now available as a DocC compiled documentation thing, which is pretty darn
awesome.
cool, I think.
Oh yeah, that's DocC. I'm so happy that DocC is being adopted, and like even Apple themselves and kind of the whole Swift community seems to be very supportive of it, and I hope it kind of just continues that way because it's awesome. There's like no downside to it in my opinion. So that's great to see.
Mm-hmm. And I think the Swift programming language book itself has been open source for quite a while. But now that it's in DocC, it's very easy to contribute to. And you can use it as like a learning platform to learn how to write narrative-driven documentation for your own projects. Probably open source projects more than closed source ones, because you always have someone in-house to explain stuff. But for everyone else, it's very nice to have something that can go in depth to explain topics. And it can be a great repository for learnings as a company, or like after action reports if something went weird and you need to like document the process for next time, or how to redo the fast lane thing because everyone forgets how to do the fast lane thing on a yearly basis. It's saving us from the thing that we would have forgotten how to do on a yearly basis by giving us another thing to remember how to do on a yearly basis. So I think it washes itself out in that regard. But yeah, DocC is great for all of those kinds of things, and this is kind of a great showcase of it at scale, right? Because there's no documentation that's going to be smaller than an entire book, in my personal opinion. So this kind of showcases it at its best. And they've improved it in that process to be better for that. So definitely go check it out. We have a link in our show notes.
Yeah. We use Notion at work, and I've like kind of a love-hate relationship with Notion. I think it's fine in some regards, but in others, I think it can be really easy to sort of lose structure, and it can be hard to find things and stuff. So,
search is not good in Notion? I would have never known.
No, I know. Crazy. This is the first time you've ever heard of that.
I don't think search exists in DocC, but at least it's indexable by Google.
I know. But like, as far as like, I mean, we have everything on there, not just like developer documentation, but just like company stuff. But getting specifically like developer docs in there would be really cool. I might try to push for that. I don't know how successful it would be. We're kind of pretty tightly integrated with Notion, unfortunately. So, yeah.
Well, you get Git history with it, and that's always useful, especially when documentation changes over time, and the old description might have made more sense. So that's one push in the favor of not it being in Notion.
Yeah, nice. That's a good idea.
Another thing that got kind of announced, and we were kind of discussing this loosely up until now, is Swift 5.8. And this is now bundled as a part of the Xcode 14.3 preview, or beta build. And we'll give a preview of that in a bit. But there's a whole bunch of new additions to Swift 5.8 that we figured we might be able to go through. And the first of which is with discarding task group, which I think we discussed like a week or two ago. Or 3, depending on how many episodes happen per week. But yeah, that one is totally in there. So you can start playing with it. Though, as we said, it's there for a very specific purpose of being useful in like Swift Neo. So you might not find like an immediate use for it, but if there is something that comes up, then it is a tool at your disposal.
Yeah. We've also got app back deployed, which I can't remember if we talked about. I would assume it's easier well, for back deploying things, I can't think of an example of like, well, the first thing that comes to my head is like back deploying async await. I think happened, um, maybe in Vapor, maybe not. I can't remember. Is that basically what you're doing? Is you just marking it for a specific version to back deploy to?
Yeah, so this is one of those weird ones that I don't think went through the Swift evolution process. I actually did. Swift evolution 0376. But its main like user is going to be Apple. And that's because everyone else can just ship a binary of the framework that needs to be used, and that just gets bundled, and no one else is relying on like an OS to provide like functionality. And that's where back deploy comes in. It allows Apple to go ahead and mark certain functions that were introduced in, say, macOS 14, but they don't need macOS 14 to exist. Like, they could totally exist on macOS 12, and they're just like purely additive. And what back deploy does is it will go ahead and configure your app to basically include the code for that function inside of your app. But if you're running on macOS 14 or later, it will go ahead and use the framework's implementation of it. But if you're on a version of the OS where that doesn't exist, then it will go ahead and use the version that you just compiled with. And that allows you to back deploy, or not you back deploy, but it allows you to use back deployed functions in your apps without like upping the minimum that your app needs to like reasonably work.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it's something that works together with the add available checks.
Right.
And again, it's not something that you as a developer will probably ever need to write. But if you spot it in the Swift headers or the interface files, then you can go ahead and know that, hey, this is a new function, but it's available even on older OSs because it's been marked as such. And that means that the whole functionality is kind of not like super close source, that Apple doesn't want that functionality just like leaking out of the framework. And allows others to kind of just bundle it. So that might mean that new views in SwiftUI, for instance, those might become available to old apps just by Apple annotating their classes appropriately, or their types, I should say.
Cool. Nice.
Another thing that's just like I don't think had a Swift evolution thing at all, is you can use collection downcasts and case patterns. So if you have like a switch, where you have an array, and that's an array of anything, you can have case let ints as an array of int, or case is an array of bool. That said, I would never suggest anyone use this. This is a very like computationally expensive way of figuring out what things are. So if you can avoid an array of any to begin with, then you're probably better off.
Oh, sure.
And just have two different functions, that this one takes an array of int and this one takes an array of bool. And that means that the compiler will be able to choose which function to use at compile time, based on like what the source is. And you're going to be much better off with that. But if you ever need to do it dynamically, this is an expensive way of giving you a nice syntax sugar to be able to do that. So that way you don't need to like set it up in several iflets. You can use case matching in a switch to kind of get a whole bunch of different scenarios very quickly and succinctly.
Gotcha. Cool. We've also got unsafe API improvements. So there's like unsafe mutable raw pointer, unsafe mutable buffer pointer, unsafe mutable raw buffer pointer.
It's a whole bunch of those.
Yeah, just like it says, it added previously missing initialization and deinitialization methods, including more performant initialization from collection types. There's a couple other things. I don't really use like any of the unsafe APIs, so this means like nothing to me. I don't really know the benefit of it per se, but cool.
Yeah, they're more collection like. So like if you have a slice of one, it behaves more like a collection where you can use it in other places more readily. And that's basically it. It's just making it a little nicer to use and a little less antagonistic, because they're kind of hard to use, and for good reason. Like, we're trying to steer people away from using unsafe APIs in Swift, even though they exist. So if you do need to use them, then they're a whole lot nicer to use as a result of these improvements. If you don't need to use them, then you can kind of like skip over that because it's meaningfully complex on purpose, basically.
Right. Yeah.
This next one is interesting, though, and that is that you can use implicit self whenever you capture self in a closure. So, for instance, we've all seen the pattern where you have like you have a closure, and you want to use self in it, and then the compiler is like, hey, you're going to capture self as a result of this. So then you're like, okay, let me mark it as weak self, and then let me go ahead and put self ? Dot do the thing everywhere inside of that closure. And if you have a whole bunch of things that you're accessing, you have a whole bunch of self dots or self ? Dots. Well, now you can go ahead and omit the self dot part because it understands that you've kind of marked self as being captured, and therefore you don't need to explicitly spell out that you're using self anymore, and the compiler will just move on because it gets the hint. There are two like sub-directions that this can go in. You can either just weakly capture self, and what this does is it makes it a self ! Dot under the hood, or you can guard let self equals self else return kind of pattern, and that means that self will be unwrapped everywhere. So the unwrapped version, that one is kind of good to stay up until Swift 6, up until and including Swift 6. But for Swift, for the other version of this where you have weak self and then you're not guarding it, so you're using self ! Dot, that functionality is currently valid, but it won't be valid in Swift 6. It will be a compiler error.
Nice.
And that's is kind of forcing you to either mark it unowned, or to go ahead and have a guard let self equals self, or guard let self else now, that you can kind of skip the equals self part, to kind of explicitly state that you want it to be unwrapped and you don't want that functionality where you just have like dangling optionals to deal with. So I'm not sure what I think about this. This feels like it's one of those iffy decisions that make things better, sure, but also hide like the complexity that's happening under the hood. And maybe that will kind of clean itself up in Swift 6, but I'm not too sure.
Yeah. I kind of lean on the side of I like it a little bit more, just because it feels, I guess there's sort it feels more like, assuming you weren't in a closure, you could just have implicit self anyway. And so this kind of brings it back to like, if you're in a closure, you're still in the same class. So it sort of makes sense. If generally when you're referring to self, that just means the class or whatever type you're in. So you're not referring to that closure. So it just, I don't know, kind of brings it, I guess, full circle to me. Mm-hmm. I kind of like it. And I'm also happy that the implicitly unwrapped self is like going to be an error in Swift 6. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Or is it an error or a warning?
It would be an error.
It will no longer compile. Cool, yeah.
Yeah. And that's because it's self ! And if you want self ? You have to actually spell it out. I guess the only thing that I'm worrying about is if you write weak self, then you might forget to go ahead and like put the guard let in there, because everything will now compile. And that's therefore fair. Like you're not going to notice as quickly that there's a problem. But as mentioned, that will clean itself up in Swift 6. So we just need to wait for Swift 6 to get here. And we're at 5.8. So what's left? 5.9 and then 6, right? It's definitely not going to go 5.10, 5.11, 5.12.
Yeah, they definitely haven't had a track record of doing that. macOS 10.
macOS 10 dot 10.
Yeah, exactly.
.10. I think there was a 10.10.10. Maybe. I don't know. But along the lines of improvements coming to Swift 6, there is a cool feature that came, and that is that you can pass a compiler flag called enable upcoming feature and then specify the feature. And that will allow you to get the Swift 6 functionality for a lot of new things early without waiting for Swift 6 to come out. And that means that you can pre-flight your code and make sure it will compile in both Swift 5 and Swift 6. Or opt in early to the features that you know are coming. So there are a few of these. There's concise magic file. And this one's actually great because it means that you can finally use fatal error again. The reason why you might not want to have used fatal error is because it uses the pound file. I don't know what those are called, literals. And the pound file literal is the full path of your file on your OS. And that includes your username, and includes all your subdirectories, and it is not great to ship in an application. So that gets fixed if you use the concise magic file feature. It will go ahead and change that to just be like rooted to your module. So it's a much smaller file. It saves a bunch of space. Does not leak your company secrets in the process. So A+ to that. You can finally use fatal error once again. The next one that's interesting is forward trailing closures. And we currently have backward trailing closure scanning in Swift. So for instance, if you have animate with duration, and then you have the animation block, and then you have the completion block. If you specify both of them, excellent. If you specify just one, by default, it will default to the last closure that it saw, even if they're both optional. Now, this doesn't actually happen, you might notice, because animate with duration comes from Objective-C, and there are actually two versions. There's animate with duration animation block, animate with duration animation block, and completion closure. And because there are two method signatures, that's why it chooses the one where there's only one, because none of the arguments are optional for either of those. Now, that's just a side effect of it coming from Objective-C. If we were writing this as a Swift API, we would never have done that. We would have said, hey, this one is an optional closure, this one is not an optional closure, and we'll just scan through as you would think to do it. So you would be able to write animation with duration and then close the parentheses, open the curly brace, and then there's your closure for the animation block, not the completion. But we don't have that in Swift currently because it would break everything. So in Swift 6, that's when they're making the change to finally add that. And you can get that early by using the enable upcoming feature forward trailing closures to get that. The final one is /regex literals. Basically, you can use the /regex literals in code. And yeah, nothing bad can happen from that.
Except currently you're using regular expressions.
Yeah, don't use regular expressions. That's the bad thing. But currently, if you try to do that, there's all sorts of chaos that can happen. This kind of makes it a language feature, so other things are more strict. Namely, you have to you can't use 2 slashes in all sorts of different situations because they're now reserved for that. And yeah, there's a whole proposal that kind of explains all the shortcomings of that kind of thing, and that's why it's been feature flagged as a upcoming feature. But if you want to use regex literals, you totally can, and then the compiler will kind of help you out in that process by telling you, hey, this is malformatted. You need to improve it. If you do choose to use any of these, you can use a #if directive, if has feature. And then in parentheses, you can specify the feature that you want. And that will allow you to go ahead and have code that will compile for both the new stuff and the old stuff, because you can go ahead and conditionally choose one to have one or the other. I think another one of those is you can now use the if or the pound if available checks to go ahead and add property wrappers to things. That wasn't possible before, and now can just wrap the property wrapper before a type, for instance. So that's really neat as well. So yeah, lots of improvements to Swift 5.8, and this is surely not the last version of Swift 5 that we'll see, but it's one of the last ones as we finally start to approach Swift 6.
Yeah. So I assume this isn't the case, but you wouldn't be able to like enable the flag and then ship something like
totally
put something on the App Store with this. Oh, you could.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't work in previous versions of Swift. Like this is now being introduced as a part of the Swift compiler. But you could totally go ahead and do that. I believe these feature flags are of finished features. They're not incomplete ones, if that makes sense.
Okay. So you couldn't do this for everything, but like any of these upcoming features you would be able to use.
Yes, I would say that. I might be mistaken, and I'll follow up if I am. But there's a separate setup for incomplete features that are kind of flagged behind stuff, like for instance macros. Those are not complete, but you can go ahead and play around with them now, and there are compiler flags to enable them. But they haven't kind of elevated to this level of this would be breaking to the source language, and therefore we're making them available piecemeal, so that way you don't have to jump all in cold turkey into Swift 6.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. That's fun to know.
So along with Swift 5.8, we have Xcode 14.3. And in Xcode 14.3, we have even more fun things. Namely, there's a new module verifier. That sounds fun. It verifies modules.
Ooh.
I'm sure it probably helps a ton if like
I'm sure
you have a whole bunch of different packages and they're not playing nice together. That will go ahead and tell you what's wrong. So joking aside, this is probably super useful. In fact, the new build system has that kind of graphical overview of like where things are getting stuck during compilations, and that can allow you to like make decisions as far as, okay, maybe I should modularize this piece of code, or this like segment of my app only deals with the data model. Let me make a module of the data model, and then that does not need to be something that holds everything else back. And that view can help you make that decision. So I'm sure this adds a bunch more to that, so that way you can go ahead and make those decisions a little more carefully, rather than not really knowing what you're doing.
I think this is one of the biggest features that I'm stoked for. You can now print in SwiftUI previews, which is huge because it's so annoying having to, when you're in, I guess, like the rapid prototyping phase of SwiftUI, and you're kind of getting to the point where integration's not working. What I would do is print things out, and it wouldn't work, so you'd have to run the app and get to the right view or whatever. So being able to actually see printed whatever you're printing while the SwiftUI preview is running, I think is absolutely huge. So yeah, I'm stoked about that one. I think that's a great addition and was sorely needed.
Yeah, that's definitely when you have like so little at your fingertips to help debug why something is not like working exactly like the way you want it, and you need to like actually just get a number to measure or to like see what's coming in.
Yeah.
And to quickly verify, right? That's all you need. Yeah. This is the perfect tool for that job. And you get a waste paper in the process. No, I'm just kidding. It's not that kind of printing. But this is limited to SwiftUI's print or Swift's print function.
Swift's print, yeah.
Yeah, it's not all logging. So that might actually mean this is the only useful console that you have in Xcode that is not filled to the brim with all sorts of junk from the frameworks. I don't know. Or maybe all the frameworks are also printing all sorts of junk. Who knows? We will find out once this comes out of beta, because it's going to be fun. One that I'm super excited about is the result builders have been completely rewritten to match the same constraints that the rest of the language has. So instead of having two weird modes, you have Swift and then you have result builders. Now you just have Swift. whether you use them in result builders or not, you're going to get the same functionality and the same inference of types, which means that you're no longer going to run into, oh, you're making this nice Swift UI thing, and then you made one mistake, and therefore it no longer compiles in constant time. And it's not really telling you why, because it has nothing to do with what you just typed. You just typed something incompatible with something else. Or your cat walked on the keyboard and you have no idea what's now different between previous and before. And yeah, there's a whole new diagnostics for this. I kind of laughed a little because one of the examples did not make sense to me. It was like, here's the brand new diagnostics. Looks how much more sense this makes. And I was like, I still don't understand what it's trying to tell me. But it's more correct. And that's the important thing here. Yeah. And that's what we need to recognize.
Yeah. It's gotten better, but like I remember at the start of SwiftUI, it was like, you had no idea why it was wrong. It would just give you this huge error with all of the generics just like nested inside of each other. It was just this massive error message, and it's gotten better. But this is like definitely a huge step in actually letting you know why something is wrong. There's a couple other cool things like type checking. They have an example of using table, and the type checking was dropped from 4 seconds to 0.6 seconds, so pretty big improvements there. So performance gains, and just as far as you writing the Swift code is probably going to be a fair amount better. So
yeah, because that means everything's faster, right?
Exactly. This also has me thinking, I'm hoping that it, like for type checking for things, will also work well with Vapor, because it also uses sort of similar things with like key paths and stuff. So I'm hoping that this will also improve like key path type checking and stuff with Vapor.
Oh yeah, maybe. So yeah, and anything that uses something like SwiftUI, so regex or Leaf in Vapor, I forget what the WebAssembly thing is, but any of those will benefit from this. It's not specific to SwiftUI. It's just Apple is learning with SwiftUI like where the where the creaky edges are of their boat, and they're fixing them rather spectacularly by replacing it with like a brand new boat. So hopefully they don't need to replace it with brand new boats all the time. And we have more incremental improvements from here, but this is like one hell of an improvement that I am definitely looking forward to messing around with.
Yep, for sure.
And there was one last surprise that came along with Xcode 14.3, and that is a mystery compute module. What could it mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I actually somehow missed this article. I thought I read through everything, but it looks like I missed this one. So I have no idea. The first thing that comes to mind is I don't know if this is it. And again, I haven't read the article, but there's like Raspberry Pis, right? They have like the normal form factor, and then they have something called a Raspberry Pi compute module, which is sort of like a more sort of embedded system. So I think cool if I think we've talked about this, like it's probably been well over a year ago now, but like Apple introducing some sort of low power,
like Apple TV sized, right? That would be a perfect little
but you can run Swift on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Swift UI.
Yeah. So enlighten us. What is it actually?
Oh, we have no idea.
Potentially.
Cool. This is kind of like what we're debating right now is it some sort of Raspberry Pi like device? Is it just like an Apple TV that actually I guess you could totally use Apple TVs as little tiny compute boards.
Totally could.
They have they have
like A-series chips.
Mm-hmm. And HDMI coming out of them. Do they have USB? I don't think they have USB anymore. Yeah, they got rid of the USB. There might still be USB hidden inside of the Ethernet connector. I think one generation of Apple TV did have pins that were hidden inside of the Ethernet connector for USB. But yeah, it can be that, or it might be something like a Mac Pro, where you have the base Mac Pro with the M2 Ultra, is where the rumors are currently leading. And then you have a card with a bunch of compute modules attached to it. Apparently they run iOS, which is interesting, and there are two versions. There's Compute Module 13,1 and Compute Module 13,0. Maybe these are new MacBook Airs, the 13-inch .1 and the 13-inch .3. I don't know. Maybe they are the little puck that you need to use with the fancy VR goggles. There's all sorts of different kind of thoughts as far as what these could be. We really don't know. All we know is that they were included in Xcode, and we know they have a name.
Gotcha. Yeah, the idea of having a PCIe card with a CPU on it, that brings back old computer days when you would just slot in the CPU and stuff. That's kind of cool.
The thing I'm thinking of is virtual PC. On your Mac, you can get an Intel card that you would put in that you can run Windows off of, in a window on your Mac, because it's a completely separate computer in your computer. Yeah. And I don't think that's gonna ever make a comeback. As ridiculous as that was, virtual PC, good stuff.
Interesting. Well, what do we have until Dub? A few months, I guess. So maybe they'll announce it then. I'm not sure.
Right around the corner.
I just love that people will dig into, new versions of Xcode or new versions of macOS and just, see and speculate what's coming up. So it's kind of cool. You can never obfuscate too much, I think. You're always going to miss something, or, maybe this is on purpose that they included this so we can all speculate and drive up speculation.
So one more thing that's right around the block is changes that are coming to WebKit. So two important changes, I would say. The first is push notifications are finally a thing for progressive web apps. And this is something that I think was one of the last pieces that prevented people from just saying, forget the native app, we're just going to write a web app. But you couldn't send notifications out of it. And therefore they're okay, we'll write a native app that houses a web app so that we can have notifications. So I think this is one of those final pieces, and we're getting it. Yeah.
It's also got focus support and badging, so that's cool too. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about, progressive web apps. I guess it makes sense for some people. I'm an app developer, man. I just want apps.
Well, they're probably a lot better nowadays. And one more thing that is coming, that is probably suspect, if you don't know why Apple's probably making all these changes now, is that if you are a third-party browser, you can now add progressive web apps to the home screen. They won't be running in your third-party browser. They will be running under the system built WebKit. But this kind of seems like a great way to say hey, we totally can and allow you to download apps from anywhere. Just look at this great solution that you can just go to this website and say add to my home screen, and then you have the app. Seems like
the internet is the app store.
I know, and all along you could have done this. It was a sweet. What did Steve Jobs call it? A sweet solution to apps not being available on the original iPhone. That comes full circle now. You can now download any app you want. In fact, you can put any website you want. So it's just limited by those web developers' imagination. And there's totally nothing that is part of native SDK-ness that would prevent them from building a good quality app. Though that said, everything is so fast nowadays that probably that is more or less the case, minus the creepy APIs like Bluetooth and all that. But yeah, that's now a thing, and that's probably very strategically landing now rather than 10 years ago. So that way Apple can kind of like make an argument that they've had this all along and government should just leave them alone. And I don't know how much it's going to work because this sounds like a very technical solution in the parlance of senators and stuff like that. So maybe you just have to show them, and then they're convinced. Maybe you have to make a few apps so that way they can be convinced that, oh yes, this is a real app that we're adding. So we'll see how much Apple's going to need to fight this battle. But yeah.
As far as iOS 16.4, we've got new emoji, which is cool.
So many new emoji.
There's some pretty good ones. I like the shaking face. Got like the hand, like what do they call it? Pushing hand, kind of like stop.
In both directions. We finally got a moose.
Yeah, a moose, a donkey,
the goose.
The goose.
Jellyfish.
And some maracas, huh?
Huh?
Yeah.
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 There's some culinary. I was gonna say sweets, but ginger's not sweet. But yeah, you can finally tweet some ginger. You can toot some edamame, and you can fan yourself and play this flute. But yeah, we finally have an emoji for Wi-Fi, which is cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's surprising we didn't have one up until now. And yeah, I think that's about it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a donkey too.
Yeah.
And a flower. So yeah, that's the real reason everyone updates their phones anyways. So it's good that this is coming late in iOS 16's life to get everyone to get onto the latest version of that. And allow us as app developers to use all the fixes that came to like SwiftUI in the process that haven't been back deployed in that process. So that's always fun. There is another, and this is, mind you, my favorite feature because it includes the words 5G. There's 5G standalone. And this is actually something I'm very afraid of. And I will explain to you why. When the tech came to my house like 2 years ago to install like cable internet, he was saying that, well, soon we're not even going to be going to people's houses anymore to connect you up to internet because we can just put a 5G station in your house and you'll just get it wirelessly. And that terrifies me because that means that infrastructure will never improve to the point where you can get reliable internet and you will be stuck with wireless in your home, which does not sound like a great plan when wired is currently like everywhere. But it is coming. I know it. And this is a sad thing. That is all.
That is sad. Yeah. No, seems sort of counterintuitive. Like you can never, I don't know, maybe not never, but like you would never be able to get like as good latency, as low latency, you know, from wireless as you would from wired and everything. So that's interesting. But yeah, so there's this 5G standalone, which you can get up to 3 gigabit per second, which is
that's
crazy.
Pretty cool. That's only download though.
That's way cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, what are you going to need to upload it? Well, I don't know. I mean, we're talking about like 5G, right? So like this is cellular. You don't have it on your Mac. What are you going to upload from your phone that needs 3 gigabits upload?
The iCloud video you just shot that you want to get on your computer without
the
airdropping
4K ProRes. Yeah, fair. All right.
That's the real for ProRes. That's the real direction that we're going. We're not going to have fast Wi-Fi. We're not going to have fast USB-C. We're going to have fast 5G to go into some cloud somewhere so that we can download it slowly to your computer afterwards.
I feel like we're regressing somehow. Just maybe. Just a little
5G. 5G.
The best.
But,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they do it, though. So it's like aggregating multiple bandwidths. So they've got like 100 megahertz, 90 megahertz, and 25 megahertz. And it sort of shows the individual speeds of like 1500 megabits, 1300 megabits, and 198 megabits, and aggregates them all together, and you get your over 3 gigabit per second. So kind of an interesting idea. It looks like T-Mobile's the only carrier that supports it, and right now it said something like Samsung devices are the only phones that support it, but this would bring it to iPhone as well. So it's kind of cool. I'm not on T-Mobile, so
I'm not either. I have the crappiest one, AT&T, which has like no 5G. It has the fakest 5G out of all the 5Gs, because they were like, we're getting it first, 5GE. It's like the worst one.
Such a scam, dude. Like not even actually 5G.
I don't know what I think about AT&T nowadays, but they promised me one day they will have fiber in my neighborhood, and that's the only hope I'm holding on to. But yeah, 5G. If you've ever wanted 5G, now you can get 5G. Yeah, I don't remember what I wanted to say. Wi-Fi actually works very similarly to what you were specifying before, where like fast Wi-Fi now is using multiple channels at once to kind of like accumulate that bandwidth. And the latest Wi-Fi 6E, 5G, 5G, Wi-Fi 5GE, Wi-Fi 5GE. That's what we need in our lives. No. But that uses a channel width of 160 megahertz. And that's huge. Why you can get like up to roughly up to 2.8 gigabits with the optimal like settings and number of antennas and stuff. And I can corroborate, like I've totally gotten 1,600 megabits per second, which is absolutely bananas on wireless, right? Both upload and download. Excuse me.
Faster than, I mean, that's faster than gigabit on like.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, I have gigabit fiber, but that's I mean, obviously it's faster, but that's just nuts.
Mm-hmm. And Wi-Fi 7 is doubling that to 320 megahertz windows, which is essentially going to double it again. Though I think they're doing other things too that's going to like push it to like 40 gigabits per second or something insane. So we're not there yet. It's going to be a few years before
Thunderbolt
we have
over
Wi-Fi 7.
Wi-Fi.
I know, it's just going to be just flaky.
Yeah, fair.
So my poor 25 gigabit network won't be able to support it.
Oh, poor boy with your 25 gigabit.
It will be the limiting factor.
Yeah.
But yeah, wireless is getting fast, and I hope wired gets fast as well, so that way you can keep up with that. Otherwise, like you have nothing to backhaul your wireless infrastructure on. One last thing that's coming to iOS 16.4 is betas are now tied to Apple IDs, and I've seen a lot of mixed reactions to this. I think for myself, where I use like my one Apple ID with everything, this is very convenient because then it just means that I will just see betas and I won't need to download profiles anymore. And when DubDub comes around and I want that beta right now, I can just go to settings and get it. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yep. I think it's cool as well. I also just basically use one Apple ID for everything. So not a big issue with me. One thing I did think about, and it's probably a pretty edge case, is like non-developers that use developer betas. I wonder if that's kind of the reason they're doing this, so that you have to have a developer account. Otherwise, it mentions you can still get the public beta, but if you want to get specifically the developer beta, you have to have a developer account. So I don't know if that means a paid developer account, or if you can just sign up as a developer, not pay the $100 and still get the beta. I don't know. So.
And for anyone worried that you do use a separate Apple ID, I think it still stands that you can sign into both on your device. And this is useful for other reasons, like two-factor. Like you might not know this, but you can sign into multiple Apple IDs on your device, and that will enable two-factor on all of those Apple IDs. So then you can go ahead and use that device as a two-factor like code generator. And I think that will probably also enable that beta thing. So you can sign in with your personal Apple ID as your primary one, and then you can go to add account and add a second Apple ID that is not signed into email and all that, but it will be able to give you two-factor codes, and it will be able to give you the little beta call out. So I think that will probably be the likely solution if you don't have that set up. Otherwise, you can always invite your personal Apple ID to whatever work org App Store Connect account you have. And that's always a great way of just getting in on those sweet developer betas.
Yeah.
Though lately I have not put a single developer beta on any of my devices, so I don't know how what the reasons are of wanting to do that if you are not a developer. I would say the public betas are probably a little safer because oh boy, there have been some hot messes in terms of developer betas that have been released.
Yeah, I think people just want the new features faster, but yeah.
On the other side of the pond, Windows can now be virtualized on Apple Silicon. It's officially sanctioned to go ahead and do that. So far via Parallels, but yeah, it's now official. You can get a license for Windows that you can virtualize.
Yep,
I
tried it. I have Parallels. And unfortunately, I haven't used it in years, and it keeps renewing without me forgetting to stop the subscription. So
congratulations, you have modern Parallels. You can tell us how it
works. Yes, I tried it the other day. It was okay. Not all apps were running. I mean, it's Windows on ARM, right? So not everything is compatible. You're not emulating x86. It's straight up Windows on ARM. What you can do is you can choose the amount of cores and everything, just like you could with old Parallels and stuff. So I ran Cinebench on it with 8 cores. Not great. 2,600 points, and the M1 Max gets well over 10,000. I can't quite remember. So it's not super fast, but I guess if you need some Windows app to run and you don't have a Windows computer, I mean, it's viable-ish. Windows on ARM support seems not great. I know that Microsoft's been pushing for it. I think they made a Surface that the same generation of a Surface device that ran an x86 chip and an ARM chip, and just the ARM chip was just so bad. So I mean, Apple's way ahead as far as ARM performance goes. So I don't know where this is going to lead. I guess it does say something about Windows and Microsoft trying to push ARM if they're opening this up, which I didn't think they would. We've had M1 devices for almost 3 years now. And this is the first time it's sort of been condoned by Microsoft to be able to virtualize Windows on it. So I think some people have done it in the past, but performance isn't great. I mean, it's no Rosetta 2, right? Where you can emulate x86 on an M1 totally fine, and you basically don't notice a difference after it's launched. It's significantly slower, but it runs okay. So
interesting. I wasn't expecting it to be significantly slower like that. So I wonder if there is some more tweaking that Parallels needs to do.
Yeah, there's gotta be. I don't know. I could mess with it a little bit more. Oh, so I think one of the apps that I tried to run was Geekbench, because that's kind of a more general, or I guess more broad benchmark, and I don't think it ran, and that's why I ended up running into Cinebench. I could try it again, but yeah.
Interesting. Also interesting is Tile, which is the competitor to Apple's AirTags, has released a new anti-theft mode, and this allows you to use tiles where you cannot use AirTags as a way of tracking your belongings, so that way you can find them if they've been stolen. Now, you cannot use AirTags for this, because if you use an AirTag for that, you can also use it to stalk people, and that is not great. Though I think there was like EFF, or there was one foundation that went and used them to track if some company actually went and recycled shoes into like play like reusing the rubber inside of jungle gyms and stuff like that, and it turns out they ended up in a Singaporean flea market as shoes. So they were not recycled at all, and that company got their whistles blown. But Tile is aiming to do this with a very interesting solution. You have to sign in, you have to give them information, and you have to agree that you are liable to $1 million fine if you are caught using these to stalk people. Yeah. I don't know who you're paying that $1 million to, because this is not like a government fine. This is a private fine. So does that mean Tile gets richer for everyone who stocks with the Tile products, which is a little weird. But yeah,
you don't just have to register. You have to register your government ID with them, like with your account.
You totally cannot find those on Google.
No, absolutely not. But I mean, I think their measures for counteracting abuse are sort of honorable and somewhat well placed. Like I think it would be way harder to abuse this. My sister has an AirTag in her car, and I borrowed her car before because it's just cheap. It helps.
The car is tracking you.
Yeah, it's like very like within an hour. It's like, hey, this thing has tracked you with over 10 miles or whatever. It's not like over a long period of wait that it says, hey, this has been tracking you. It's like you've been placed in like 10 different locations in the last hour. Do you know something's tracking you? And I was like, wow, okay. I didn't realize it would be that fast. So, there's that. And I think their whole thing with this is so that, I mean, Dimitri mentioned it. It's just that if it's not announcing the Tile's presence, then they're not going to look for it. So you could hide this in some pretty, inconspicuous place and be able to find your belongings. So an interesting way of going about it. And I think it's, a pretty smart way, but definitely not bulletproof per se.
And don't forget that Tile relies on people having the Tile app and using it to track other tiles.
Exactly.
Which it puts them at a severe disadvantage to Apple, where any iOS device will just go ahead and like participate in the network. So Apple Tile is probably fighting to remain relevant here. Because as soon as they aren't, then they lose that network that they've slowly built up very carefully over years. And if people just kind of move away from that, then there's no coming back for them, I don't think. So that's one thing that Tile needs to be careful of. That said, Tile could technically participate in Apple's network, right? The protocols are open enough for that to exist, but it would also participate in the non-anti-theft mode, because it's the iOS device that's telling you it's being tracked. It's not the AirTag.
Right.
So that's something to consider. Apple has also released 2 new patents, which I found kind of interesting. The first one is that there is a hypothetical watch band that can change colors. And this seems super cool. It kind of matches the kind of 3-color band design that Apple currently has in some materials. I don't know what material this would be. Maybe it's the kind of silicone kind of material that the rubber that will just go ahead and like change color via some electrical means. But yeah, I think that would be really cool to see in person. Apparently they have a prototype internally. So we'll just have to see if they care about it enough to make a real product out of it, right?
Yeah. It's the kind of, I think it's like some electrochromic is what they call it, and like it's the same thing that they use for glass to make it go from like normal to frosted and stuff. So
interesting. That's basically an LCD.
Yeah. but my other thought was like, what if they did this with like e-ink, because e-ink is, you can have it in multiple colors. I don't know if it would like be super bright or whatever, but I think it'd be really cool to like have an e-ink display with some flexible PCB or whatever on your wrist. That'd be cool.
Ooh.
I don't know. Probably,
Yep.
perhaps not. I don't know what would be easier. I'm assuming this electrochromic thing, if that's what they're going for, but yeah, kind of a cool idea. Doesn't seem like you can do, it's not like a display, right? Like it seems like it's fairly limited to these 3 zones, like Dimitri said, but would be interesting, and also very likely very expensive.
Yep, we'll definitely need a new version of the Apple Watch, because you'll need some way of like giving power to the band, which you never needed to do up until now. And maybe it only needs it when it's changing, right? It doesn't need it all the time to like persist the color. It just needs it to change the color. So that's something to consider. But maybe it's just a band that changes color with the warmth of your wrist. All along it was those
mood ring.
Mood ring bands.
A mood band. Oh, that's awesome. That's a throwback.
But they do have a second patent, and this one's also kind of cool. iMessages can be read in your voice. So if I were to send Spencer a heartfelt iMessage that says, "Where are you? I'm waiting," in the Riverside thing, it will go ahead and read it out in my voice to be extra obnoxious. Depending on who is sending what, it can be seen as wonderful or weird. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. I know that I think it was Amazon, or maybe it was I think it was Samsung, announced something similar to this. From like a few seconds of your voice, it can simulate it pretty well and stuff. So I'm sure that's, multiple. I've heard of multiple people, not just Samsung, doing something like this with voice simulation. And I think maybe we've talked about it on the show. I don't know. I think it's more of a gimmick than anything. It's like the maybe I'm gonna upset Dimitri from this. I don't use them personally. The different ways of sending, like the confetti announcements, or the hidden messages or whatever. Yeah, it's like, okay, it's cool to announce like when you're announcing your new version of iOS or your new phone, but I mean, my phone is on silent 100% of the time. I'd never have any reason to, have a text message ring or my phone ring. I just have it on silent and it's in my pocket, so whatever. I would never like have my messages read out to me. I mean, I'm almost always alone, but still, it's like, I don't know if I like this. So, I don't know. It seems like a gimmick, or it's not for me. So.
It feels very much in the category of features that Apple already dabbled in this. For instance, in FaceTime, there's an option, there's a checkbox you can go ahead and flick that will move the other person's eyes to look at the camera.
Oh yeah,
ever so slightly. And it was done with like the best intentions. It makes things look more like intentional, right? But because people found out about it in the betas and then like raised hell, then we don't have that kind of feature. So this kind of feels in that same camp. I think this would probably be better using that existing iMessage feature where you can go ahead and record a voice memo instead of typing it, and then have that be transcribed. I think that would be a whole lot more useful.
100%,
because then you can use the person's original voice. You don't need to fake anything. And you just need to kind of like put words there so that way they don't need to listen to it on the other end, because that's a key piece. If you don't need to listen to it, then you can choose, if you can't read the transcription, to listen at the end of the day. And iMessage is like a whole ton better than voicemails. So if voicemails can pull it off, I think iMessage should be able to do a much better job, especially if it's done in like the source device and everything. So yeah, I would say that would be the better direction to go rather than the opposite. And last on our list, apparently Apple had a gaming event. I totally missed this.
Yeah, me too.
But it happened, and Apple showed off
Yep.
games.
I like 9 to 5 Max sort of sub headline. It's Apple's ... first event of the year. Like what? I think everyone is just kind of like, okay. It was.
I prefer them here to WWDC. To be 100% clear, game demos don't. No more in big events, please.
Yes, agreed. They were very cringeworthy there. It's just like no one wants to see them. Seems like some people were invited to the small event. They played some games, and like I don't really know what the point of this is, other than to say like we're gamers too in Apple Land, and that's it. You know what I mean? It's
technically,
okay,
they probably make more money than any other gaming subcategory.
Okay. Yes, agreed.
So they're the biggest gamers.
I mean, I don't know how much of that is off of like gacha games as opposed to like
it's all
Apple
gacha
Arcade.
games.
Like I think Apple Arcade does okay, but I'm sure the gacha games are like 90+% of all revenue. So I don't know what to think about this. It's something.
Yeah, it exists.
I look, man. I wish I could play all my games on my Mac, but no, I have to have a Windows computer too and suffer through Windows because I like gaming. But Apple
now you can game slowly on Parallels.
I don't want to games. Oh my gosh, that would be so bad. I bet it wouldn't even work.
Well, now you have something to try.
Yeah.
Not that those games are compiled for ARM Windows.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just going to say, if they would like let Rosetta 2 run on Windows, maybe. Okay. But yeah. So, I don't know what to think about this. It's okay.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
This week's episode of Code Completion is once again brought to you by Explain It Slowly. Have you ever wondered how anime is made, or how old TVs work, or even why you start picking up other people's accents just by hanging out with them? Welcome to Explain It Slowly, a podcast where Lynn and I explore any and every topic, from technology to food, twice a week. We've covered everything from SSDs to food comas, and can't wait to share what we've learned next with all of you. So open up your favorite podcast app and search for Explain It Slowly to learn something new with us every week. We want to thank Explain It Slowly for sponsoring our show. Search for Explain It Slowly on your favorite podcast app, or visit https://explainitslowly.show to learn more. So Spencer, I've got a code completion tip for you. This time it's all about the editor in Xcode. So, have you ever held down the Option key while just clicking and dragging on code?
I have, yes.
Haven't you noticed how amazing that suddenly gives you the superpower to make rectangle selections?
Yes, it's great.
Yep. I never use it for the rectangle selections. I always just drag straight down and make a nice long column of insertion pointers, and then you can go ahead and edit multiple lines at once, and that part is super cool. Yes.
So good.
You can go ahead and do this in a variety of different ways. The classical way is the Option key that has been around since forever in Xcode. But you can also use Control-Shift to just click anywhere and unclick if you want to get rid of them. But to just add a whole bunch of different insertion pointers. And then as you type, it'll just kind of type in all of them all at once. And that is the coolest thing in the world. You can move those insertion pointers by using your arrow keys, and then using Option to jump by word, using Shift to select stuff. You can copy that. You can go somewhere else. You can make a whole bunch of new ones. You can paste over something. It is the superpower of superpowers that is only available to users of both mice and keyboards. I don't know if you can use it only keyboard, all those Vim people that do things entirely on the keyboard. I don't know if you also have that superpower. You probably do, because Vim is Vim. But it's probably something you need to go and get a master's degree to fully comprehend how to perform.
Yes, agreed.
I needed a college diploma to know how to get out of Vim, so I don't want to know what's needed to be a fully proficient Vim user. yeah, this is a thing that you can do with your mouse and keyboard combined, and I think it is really, really cool. And any other app that exists that does not support this is just like totally broken to me, especially when you need to edit a whole bunch of things. I'm surprised the podcast CDN that we use, Fireside .fm, actually supports
Riverside.
this. And
sorry, never mind. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, the other one where you can like edit the show notes. That one actually supports editing multiple lines in their little editor, and
Nice.
like I am so glad they added that because I use it every week to like reformat our show notes into like markdown links and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely give that a try. It is a super good code completion tip.
Yep. That's like my classic usage of that is like, oh crap, I need to mark a bunch of properties as private. And I'll just like, and just like, instead of going private, copy that, up arrow, paste, just typing it once is like so nice. Man, I used to, there were a couple times when I had to do like, use that, but also with multiple selection. I think there's some weird like, eldritch combo of Control Alt and Shift where you can like be selecting multiple things at once and keep that selection running at the same time, even though they're not next to each other, and like cut those out and stuff. It's been a while since I tried that, but yeah, it's being able to select or have multiple cursors is like huge. That's a great one. Definitely like one for like saving yourself from like RSI and stuff.
Mm-hmm. On the weird combos, the claw, I like to call it, as you like configure your hand. The various different claws. Option will jump by word. Command will jump to the beginning or end of the line. Shift always selects. And then there was a really cool one that you can configure your locale to, like on the computer. And then you can go ahead and select within the camel case, like the individual words. And I don't remember for the life of me how to do that one. I configured it on one computer, and then like I never figured it out again. So if anyone does know that, you need to toot at us at Code Completion to reteach us how to do that, because that is something that is like such a lifesaver when you need it. Because our code is littered with camel case. We should be able to do that.
Options great, and that gets you a lot of the way there, but sometimes you want to pull out a word from the dot whatever, and you have to arrow key it over and stuff. So that'd be nice.
Another great one in Xcode is Control E. So if you just like click on a variable, Control E, it will give you insertion pointers in every instance of that variable. Like within the current scope.
Oh, nice.
So that allows you to quickly rename a variable or a method, not across the whole project, just within the file, but it does scope it to where you currently are. So if you have the same variable used a few different places, it doesn't mess with you too much. And that one I like memorized very early on as well. As always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on mastodon.social at Code Completion to know when new episodes go live, and feel free to toot at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis, that's SpencerCurtis, for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol, that's DimitриBouniol, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye. Oh man, reading the any block of text is so hard right now because my nose is like totally out of commission. And it's just like, I don't have the breath, the stamina necessary to get through the sentence. I'm like,
Man, don't let anyone tell you that podcasting isn't hard, man.
Oh, especially when you're sick. This is like, being sick sucks. It's been like a hot few years. And I don't know what I caught that is miraculously not COVID, but it's like just so difficult to like live. I forgot what it's like to be sick, or maybe I'm just old now.
That's
and falling
that's
apart.
What happens. Like you never appreciate how good it feels to like not be sick, and then you're like, What is my body doing to me? This is awful. Yeah.
At least I didn't cough too much throughout this episode. That's what
No,
I'm happy
it was
about.
good.
I was so close to telling you, like, hey, Spencer, do you want to do tomorrow?
We could have. We definitely could have.
Yeah, but I'm not going to be any better tomorrow. Like, that's
Yeah, you
just
will. That's how it works.
That's just perpetually kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, you're not like terminally ill. You'll get better at some time.
Well, there it is.
Maybe you are.
Oh no, please! I'm not terminally ill. I have code to write.
That's right.
You can't get rid of me now. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.